Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do one of my favorite projects, Butcherblock Countertops. Today we're working with Walnut, and I'm going to show you how I do this. And then I'm also going to give you some tips on how you can do it at home with some home shop tools you may have. So let's get to work. Alright guys, so the first step in making this butcher block is to select your material. In this case, for me, this was an easy decision because I did some other work for this customer. I sawed and dried some wood for him, made some flooring, and I have leftover material here. So we're going to use the balance of their material first, and then I'll supplement with my own stuff as needed. So this happens to be 2-inch thick. It's live edge, but we're taking the live edge off for what we're doing here. You can really use a wide range of material for butcher block. That's one of the nice things about it. You can have different strip widths, so really anything you have laying around that you have enough of will work for butcher block, which is nice. So I did some math on this. For the sections I need, I'm going to be doing 15 strips that are 1.7 inches wide. And I'm going to rip them initially here to 1.75, so 1.75 inches thick, so that I can get a finished thickness on the countertop of 1.5 inches. So I'll be able to plane that extra quarter away to clean it up. So you have to do a little bit of math up front, figure out what size your strips are going to be, your blank size as I call them, and rip those strips up, and then you can start from there. So that's what we're going to do now. I'm using a straight line rip saw. It's going to make this really fast to break down these big slabs. You can easily use a table saw or a track saw just to rip these strips. You'll see here once we get going, it's just a matter of ripping them to your dimension. Like I said, this will be 1.75 because what we're actually doing, we're ripping the strip, and then that's actually going to get turned 90 degrees. It'll get turned on end, and that's going to be the top and bottom of your countertop. So you'll see here once we get going. But for right now, we're going to rip these, and then I'm going to run them through the planer, and then we'll have a nice square surfaced on 4 sides strip that we can begin assembling our countertop with. So I'll get set up here, we'll rip and plane them, and then we'll go from there. Okay guys, so I got all my strips planed here. I made an executive decision as I was running this stuff. I was originally going to do 15 strips at 1.75 inches. I decided to add an extra strip, make it 16 strips at 1.5 inches. I did that just because I wasn't super happy with how this stuff was planing out at 1.75 inches. I had some skip planing and just some rough spots. So I thought if I took it another pass through the planer, I'd get more out of it, and I don't really mind adding another strip to it. So right now I have these, I don't know if the camera will pick up, you can see the saw marks. So we've got 2 sawed sides and 2 planed sides. The saw marks are going to be your top and bottom, the way we're doing this, because remember we ripped them and then we're flipping it. So I'm going to look at these with the saw on sides up and down, and I'm going to go along here. I'm going to chop off bad ends, if there's knots, if it has like a curve to it, I can straighten that out by cutting it shorter. And so I'm just going to go through and defect this stuff out and start laying out my courses. So we're doing 16 courses. 16 wide is going to give us our 25.5 finished with countertop for this project. I'm not going to try to glue that up all in one. It's way too much to manage. It's too hard to get 16 strips all lined up, get everything perfect. So I do them in halves. So I'm going to do 8 and 8. Half the countertop and then the second half, and then we'll put it all together at the end. Then you have one glue joint at the end to manage. So right now I'm going to set up my first set of 8, and I'm going to cut joints into it. You can do this two ways. You can run full length, whatever your length of your countertop is. That's called continuous strip butcher block. If that's what you want to do, by all means go ahead. I actually like cutting in some joints. To me, that adds a lot of character. It adds that butcher block look. I like having those staggered joints throughout, especially with a wood like walnut, where you've got light and dark contrast. Whoop, hopefully not knock the whole pile down there. That really makes a sharp look, and you'll see that here. That's the way I like to do it. It is a little bit more difficult when you come to glue up because you have more to manage, more to get lined up, but it's not that much harder, and I think it gives you a nicer look. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to start cutting on the radial arm saw. I just square cut all my strips, and then they'll get butted together. So I'm going to start making my first set of 8. I have to take them over to the other shop to glue. I don't glue anything in here. All my glue stuff is over in the other shop right next door. So I cut it here, I carry it over, assemble it over there, just because I don't have that much room in here. So if I glue over there, that shop's heated in the winter for gluing, and I can glue up a section and I can keep working. Because the one thing about this ends up being a multi-day process, because you have to glue, let the glue dry, and keep going, you know, one section at a time. So I'll get these cut, we'll get them moved over, and we'll get them into glue. Alright guys, so I got the walnut moved into the other shop here onto the clamp rack. This rack I used to clamp is shop built. You can easily build one of these at your shop. You just need straight, true runners. This is I think 12 foot long. It's way longer than what we need for this section right here, but I use it for everything. So just a straight vertical piece that'll hold everything in a level plane, and then I just use 2x4 cross members. You can space your cross members however you see fit, but I don't know, I have about a foot here, which usually works pretty well. Sometimes, depending how these joints fit, these all seem to hit cross members pretty good. Sometimes you'll have one that'll drop down that you're going to have to hold up as you glue. Try to avoid that, it just adds complication. So this is all ready to go. This is how it's going to look once it's clamped and glued. So now I'm going to just roll these up, glue on each joint, flip them back together, sandwich them, clamp them really good, and let them dry. Obviously you need newspaper whenever you're gluing on top of a wood surface. Obviously if you put wood on wood, you're going to glue it together. So you always use newspaper in between to separate. I prefer Lancaster Farming. You guys use whatever works best for you. The glue I use is Type on 3. I've been using that for many years. works really well. I've never had a problem with it, never had a failure. I remember hearing somewhere that when the joint is properly prepared, Titebond 3 is actually stronger than the wood, meaning that if you break that joint, the wood will actually fail before the glue joint. And I've actually seen that here. I've taken some ends and cutoffs and kind of snapped them. And I've actually seen where the wood will fail before the glue joint does. So that's pretty neat. So that's, if you're wondering how you can get away with just gluing this all together with no other joinery, that's how. Just really, really good glue. So, and like I said, I've been doing these for many years. I've never had a problem with them. So I'm going to set you up. I'm going to get some clamps going. The key to this is patience. There's a lot going on here. You have a lot of pieces. You just want to take your time, patience. Don't get frustrated. Don't get worked up. You have to keep a cool head and just get everything in line. Get everything going. It'll all come together. If you panic, if you start messing things up, well, then it's just going to spiral out of control. You'll have a big mess on your hands. But you take it one piece at a time. I recommend, if you're not used to doing this, dry fit. Put all your clamps on exactly the way you would before you use glue. Now, that being said, I'm not going to do that because I've done this so many times. I kind of have a feel for it. I know what my clamps can do. I know what I can do. So I usually don't take that step. But if you're new to this, take your time, dry fit everything, make sure your joints are all exactly how you want them, and then use glue. So let me set you up and I'll get to gluing. Okay, so that's how I like to do the glue. I always do a zigzag with a line through the middle. That seems to work pretty good for me. As I go to stack these back together, I like to give them a little wiggle back and forth to spread that glue out. The clamps are going to spread it too. As you put clamp pressure on that, it'll spread the glue. But I like to give them a little bit of a wiggle back and forth. Just kind of stack them in here. Get them to where they need to be. Butt your ends together as tight as you can. You're going to kind of work on that as you put some clamping pressure on to start adjusting everything. Now it kind of looks like a big mess to start. Then you get into it. Whenever possible on my ends, I like to use full-length pieces. Depending on the wood I'm working with, I can't always do that, but I have at least one here. This is a part. Start with our first clamp and just start taking up some of the slack here a little bit. Now we start looking at some of our joints. Make sure everything's tight. These don't have to be absolutely 100% perfect, and I will show you why here at the end. A little trick I have up my sleeve for fixing a little gap here and there. I have all different types of clamps. Whatever clamp you have is the best kind of clamp to use. These bar clamps are great. Pipe clamps. Pipe clamps are by far your cheapest. If you're just starting out in woodworking, you can just go to a box store and get some black iron pipe and the clamp fittings and you'll be in business. The nice thing about them is you can get different length pipes to adjust for whatever your project is. But for this, you're going to need a lot of clamping power. You're not going to want to use little bar clamps, I guess you'd call them. I mean, you can use them here and there for some extra power, but for this, you want some of these big bar pipe clamps to really crank down for you. I have an end over here I'm not thrilled with, so I'm just going to tap it back before before I clamp it all the way. I'm actually using a mallet from a flooring nailer, which just so happens to be what I have handy here, but it actually works very well. Here's another one, an end that dropped down a little bit, so I'm just going to back these clamps off, tap that back up. That went up nice. Yeah, that's fine. So we're at 1 3/4 and we're planing this to 1.5 inches. So we have a 1/4 inch to play with here. So if it's a little bit, you know, uneven on your ends, that's okay. We can fix that. So that's not, you know, at this stage, not everything has to be absolutely perfect. I'm going to throw a couple more clamps on here because I have them and it certainly won't hurt. There she is. You can see some glue squeeze out there, not a ton. And you can see obviously there's some overwood, underwood here. We're going to plane that all flat. That's not a big deal. But overall our joints look good. Might be hard to see on camera. There might be some shadow lines on some of the joints, but they're nice and tight. So this will now dry overnight. That's the problem. These countertops are a process. Because this is half of it. I have to do the other half of this section. We've got 2 more sections to do after this. So that's 6 glue ups there. Plus in the sections, the halves need to be glued. So that's 3 more glue ups. So it is a process. It's not difficult. We're just basically repeating the same thing over and over. So I'll do the second half of this. I'll show you gluing the 2 halves together and how I finish it. And then we'll go through the rest of it. This half here is going to get cut with a 45-degree miter. This is in part half of an L-shaped counter, so I'll show you how I do that. And this is the basics of it though. Nothing super complicated, but hopefully you found it interesting. I'll bring you back tomorrow when we do another section and we'll go from there.